Welcome to The Disruption is Now. Join us on this enlightening journey as we explore how AI is impacting our jobs, careers, lives, and the human experience. Each episode, host Greg Matusky will converse with visionaries and innovators at the forefront of AI, diving into its challenges, opportunities, and impact. So buckle up as we venture into the heart of disruption, and together, let's unfold the future.
Well, welcome to another episode of The Disruption is Now. I am your host, Greg Matusky. It's the podcast where we talk about how AI is disrupting our commerce, our economy, our culture. And every time we come on, we try to do something different. And today I have a pretty interesting guest who started with a small little conference many years ago, 2018, I think. And it's now emerged as North America's largest AI conference, AI4. Michael Weiss is in New York with about 300 attendees years ago. Michael, thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Greg.
I'm telling you, I've been to AI4 many times, and it's turned into an amazing conflab of the best minds in AI. I want to hear a little bit about your journey. Why were you dabbling in AI in 2018 before the Columbus moment when ChatGPT discovered America in 2022? What were you doing back then?
Yeah, fair enough. So I got interested in AI in 2015-16, really around when OpenAI started. I started following their research. And then at the time, from 2015 to 18, I was actually organizing a different event, this thing called World's Fair Nano. I was trying to organize a World's Fair in the United States. So I wanted to organize like a 100 million person, 6-month event, like the World's Fairs of old in Flushing Meadows in 1964, you might be familiar with.
Absolutely.
And we ended up honestly just running out of money with that project. And so then it was like, all right, what do we do now? And I had learned a lot about AI through the World's Fair events. They were like these consumer-facing technology festivals, basically. And we covered every possible future. We covered the future of cities, the future of food, the future of transportation, the future of space, the future of AI. We covered all of it. And the one common thread, from 15 to 18 that all those people were teaching me and talking about was they were all referencing how they were using data-driven insights and machine learning to propel, their businesses in whatever the sector was. And so then in 2018, when we ran out of money with that, it was just kind of obvious to me that AI was becoming this meta technology that every other technology and non-technology sector was going to rely on. And so then, we decided to start AI4 in 2018. And then we also decided to focus on industry applications of AI instead of consumer, which is what we were doing with the World's Fair thing. And the first show we did was a little half-day conference in Brooklyn at this small hotel. 300 people came, but people loved it. And and that's how we got our start.
Well, that's quite a story. I mean, that you go from that to where your AI for this year will have Jeffrey Hinton and Fei Li. I mean, you've got many big names. Tell us a little bit about what this year's show will hold for participants.
Yeah, so if you look back to 2018 when we started, all the models were being trained in-house on proprietary data. What that means is just like the organizations coming, whether it was a big bank, a big hospital, pharma company, government agency, whatever, they were all doing these custom in-house models on relatively small amounts of data with relatively small amounts of compute. And then, fast forward to, winter, December, I think it was 2022, and ChatGPT is released. And, all that really did was it dazzled people with the power of these, foundation models, these models that are, trained by model-specific companies, which OpenAI and Anthropic are. They're providing models as a service. And, that kicked off then the generative AI boom, but then that, pretty quickly has evolved into the AI agent boom, because agents is, really the most represents most of the real world applications of Gen AI. So there's going to be a lot of agent stuff. You're going to see agentic this, agentic that across pretty much every industry as every major company tries to figure out how to, ultimately just automate sophisticated tasks. So the agent stuff's going to be big. Then, one of the things I'm excited about is the world model stuff. So, one of the next races that people are in is to try to crack a foundation model, but for physical space. And so right now, the world model companies like Feifei's company, for example, or Jan LeCun's new company, these people are trying to develop a foundation model similar to the LLMs in that it is a general purpose intelligence across text and digital space, but they want to create a foundation model for physical space. So a general purpose intelligence across physical space. And once somebody nails that, which it hasn't been nailed yet, but once someone nails that, we're going to see, I think, as many, if not more, new applications of AI come out. And I think some of them will be actually a lot more valuable than the LLM applications.
So whose side do you fall on? I mean, Jan says that we're going down the wrong lane with regard to LLMs, that language itself can't create a physical representation of the world, that you need a different kind of transformer-based AI. And then others say, no, we're closer than there. I mean, you look what's going on in video right now. 6 months ago, I would have said, yeah, I think it's impossible to create a feature-length film that has any kind of consistency. Today, I'm seeing it, and with LLMs, they're really coming close, I think, to that authentic kind of human video. I don't. Where do you fall on Jan's take on it? That you're going to have to come up with a whole new way of doing AI, a whole new system.
Maybe. I mean, he's always been a little, antagonistic to whatever the general is. Yeah, a little contrarian. And obviously, Jan, he contributed convolutional neural networks, which, was kind of the original image recognition stuff back when he worked at Bell Labs. I think one of his initial applications was getting a computer to recognize, like numbers on a check. And that was, amazing. But look, he was at Meta running their, fair, their AI lab for a long time. He, didn't create LLMs. So I think, the path he's pushing on could be good, and we might not need it.
Let me go back to something you said earlier. I found it really interesting that, you had started these industry specific kind of venues and thinking how it would be tied into specific industries. And then you realized how across the entire spectrum that AI wouldn't be a technology just for biotech or financial, but that it's going to transform every business. To me, that's very impressive. It came to you so early. Was there something that tipped you off to that? Because I had always thought maybe with LLMs, it would be more related to communications, human language, than it would to numbers and coding. I mean, coding totally kind of caught me off guard how well it does that, and recursive self-improvement and how it does it. Was there something early in your worldview, which I got to give you a lot of credit for, that made you realize this is going to be a technology that's embedded in everything that does business and every kind of human activity?
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said, I saw super early that AI was going to crush coding applications. But my high level view that gave me confidence back then to focus on AI was the simple fact that human intelligence has been, our most valuable commodity for a long time. And human intelligence is the thing that has built our civilization that we find, meaningful and valuable. And I became convinced that AI, artificial intelligence, was feasible and was going to keep getting more and more powerful and would be one of the key ways that we simply progress our civilization across all fronts. So it was really just my belief in intelligence and the value of intelligence. And then the fact that we started seeing computers actually exhibit intelligence.
Take that one step further for us, Michael, so that you could paint for our listeners what that actually means, because everyone's caught up in, compute. Everyone's caught up in the environmental consequences. Everyone's caught up in the intelligence. And when I talk to the random person, business person, they don't really understand the nature of human intelligence and how it'll be vastly cheaper in the future, which means there'll be more of it. Go into a little bit about that, explaining what that should do to our economy and how it should impact it with regard to the cost of intelligence and this seemingly endless stream of demand for it.
Yeah. I mean, I think, there's a few thoughts in there. I think, what is intelligence? And there's a lot we could debate it all day, but, I would say in the context of AI, at least, intelligence is a computer that can encounter a novel experience, a piece of data it's never seen before, and actually make a decision based on that experience. Because for whatever the 60, 70 years since Alan Turing wrote his paper in 1950, computers were rules based, as I'm sure you've heard, you've probably talked about with other people. And, the computer programmer had to define every rule. It had literally the programmer had to say, when you see A, computer, do B. When you see B, do C. When you see C, do D. And that's why the code bases for large software tools, are millions and millions of lines, because it's just an insane amount of rules. With AI, now we can literally teach a computer. That's why we call it, training, in the training period. We can teach a computer to have a representation of the world. For example, with the large, language models, it's a representation of, humanity's corpus of text knowledge. And then you can, prompt that AI, or you can show that AI a piece of text it has never seen, and it will actually respond to it thoughtfully. And what that will do to the world, we don't know where it'll end. We don't know where it will end as far as how thoughtful, how smart can we actually make a machine. We don't know yet. We're not even seeing the latest, the models we have now. Even the Mythos and the 5.6 stuff are not trained on, a 10x, an order of magnitude more compute than, the previous models. But those models will come, I think, either 27 or early 28. And I think those models are going to be way crazier than 5.6 and Mythos.
You pull two interesting points together, Turing and Mythos. Turing is whether it would be, whether it would reach AGI, and Mythos, they pull it off because it's hinted that it has hit AGI. What are your thoughts there? Is Mythos just the greatest piece of publicity, like Nike taking a shoe off the market because it makes you run too fast? Or are there any legitimate concerns you see? What's your attitude to that?
I think it's both. In all interesting news, there's multiple truths. And I think, with Mythos and, Dario sort of hyping it up and the fears, I think there was some truth there, because it seems like a lot of the organizations that, were looking for bugs with Mythos were, in fact, able to find vulnerabilities that they didn't know were there and probably wouldn't have found otherwise. So I think that's true.
Do you think we've hit AGI in any way?
I think the goal, look, all that keeps happening is the goalpost keeps moving. So Alan Turing, Alan Turing's the coolest, AI guy pretty much ever. He, invented computer science. He really formalized and proposed the idea of AI, that machines, will think in the future. And he did his work in the 40s and 50s. And so he didn't get to
explain that test. What was the original test?
Yeah. So his original Turing test, it's called, the Turing test after him, Alan Turing, was simply, if a human talks to a computer and the human can't tell whether the computer is a machine or a human, that passes the Turing test. And in his mind back then, that would mean, AI has arrived. And I think we've passed that. We've totally passed that for at least the vast, vast majority of humans. And I think that in a way was the original definition, of AI, of AGI, whatever. And then, the AGI, ASI stuff got popularized, I think, in part by Nick Bostrom in his book, Superintelligence, which is a very interesting book. And the AI community just keeps moving the goalpost. And so, according to Alan Turing's definition of AI, we've hit it. It's amazing. We've created conversational humans in machines, which is crazy. But according to the moving definition, we're never going to freaking get there.
Let me ask you something. I mean, last year at AI4 was all about agents, agentic AI. I had not seen it in action. Now I see it in action. I live with 21 agents in my firm. Tell us a little bit about your experience with agentic AI. What do you use it for, and what have you found it to be most competent in?
Yeah, so the agent stuff is good and is valuable today. It does take a lot of work, I find, to really make it good.
How can it be work? All you do is talk to your computer, like we're talking right now. Tell me about the work hurdle. What do you mean?
A lot of the work that I try to do in our small company and that I see others doing in larger companies is still just the hallucination rate. So, the error rate on the output of these models is still very high. Vary, depends on your definition of vary, but, anywhere from 5 to 20%, depending on the model, is going to be your hallucination rate. And the models seem to keep getting more confident in their hallucinations. So, they'll tell you, XYZ response, which sounds very factual, but it just isn't. And I see that play out in our small company, every day. Like, I'll give you a very basic example.
Yeah, I'd love to hear.
Let's say we have to organize 50 kind of like curated little events as part of AI4. And of those 50 events, we have to find 50 different personas of attendees to invite to these very specific events. And so we'll upload, 10,000 people coming to AI4 and say to the AI, hey, here are 50 different personas. Please mark, the people among these 10,000 that fit these 50 personas. And, it gets the problem. It will do the work. But when you really spot check it, you're getting, like a 10 to 15% error rate, which funny enough for us actually isn't really tolerable. It seems like, pretty mundane inviting people to these little events, but we really want it to be perfect. And so we end up, having a human be a pretty big part of even that process. And so, at larger companies, like I have a friend, I spoke to recently who works at a Fortune 500 company, and they're creating a chatbot basically to help, maybe, I don't know how many, probably 100,000 sort of partners of their company do better at their job. And he was telling me kind of the same thing, which is like, it's easy to make the first pass at, the AI or the agentic workflow, but to really iron out those errors, it takes a lot of elbow grease. Yeah. And I'm hoping that, I think in a year, even the elbow grease won't be needed. I'm hoping. But they still, the AI shops have not figured it out yet.
Well, I think the elbow grease will be reduced when we really value the data and really make it quality. I know that in my own firm, that's my mantra, right? We want to push closer to the client so we have all the data we need. And if the data is correct, the hallucination rate is much lower, right? If we know exactly what their message is, we know exactly the media they want to be before, who the influencers are, and we can fill out that data, we find that the end product is usually pretty accurate. So I think those firms that really focus, get on board with agentic, build the operating system that they need. I'm on OpenClaw, for instance, and really concentrate on that How do you get that? I could see where there'd be error in that because you don't have enough information on 10,000 participants, right? But a lot of us in our careers, we focus on 20. That's what we got to know. 20 different clients we consult with, work with. And if you can educate that machine on how they live, work, and breathe, and you can download every transcript, every call, every news release, every media pitch, right? I find that that's the real elbow grease. It's not in spinning up agents. It's not in creating the shared skills. It's really in that data. And for professionals, that's where our time should be placed. It shouldn't be placed in, I always say, learning the Oxford comma. I always get dinged because they say, it makes you dumber. Well, do I remember the Oxford comma rule now? I don't. I knew it 5 years ago, Michael. I've forgotten the Oxford comma. But what I really want to concentrate on is taking that client's message and capturing it and externalizing it, telling it, amplifying it out in the ethos. And I think that's what is forgotten a lot. I read a recent article by the CEO of Microsoft. You probably saw it, where he said something like agentic without an ecosystem is basically worthless. And I think in a company like mine and yours, right, the more you can learn, the more you can put into that, the RAG or the knowledge base, the more the hallucinations stop, and the more you get better and better results. I was just working on a project before I came downstairs, and the client is it's an opening of a big event, and I've loaded everything possibly about this client, everything in the world about who he is, where he came from, his marketing plan, his first narratives, his first visions. And it gave me a work product in the timeline, which echoed it perfectly without error. But then it also included little things I never thought of. The private events you're talking about, I would have never thought of that. It's in the timeline. So I think our big task as professionals is to really focus on understanding our buyer. And it really does, our buyer. And it really does show us, I think, like 5 years ago, how little time we put into that. And instead, all the minutia kind of took us over. The Oxford comma, the verb use, the headline. But I've stopped all that. I just focus on making sure that every call I have with a client is transcribed. All of that's in the knowledge base or the skill set. And I would challenge you a little bit. I think my hallucination rate has gone well below 15%. And I don't think it's because any magic. I think it's that elbow grease that I've had to invest in for 35 years, 40 years as a professional. I don't know. What say you?
Do you measure the error rate?
Well, that's hard to do, right? Because a lot of what we do is language. And a lot of that, if you had 10 writers, okay, and you gave them the same fact set, they may come back to you, all 10 of them, with a different approach, a different lead, a different transition, different tie back. None of them, though, may be any less worthy. Okay.
Yeah. So you're in a perfect business because
right.
For AI, because 10% error rate, you literally don't even notice it, and it doesn't matter.
Are you saying the hallucinations are a PR firm's practice?
Not that, just that, to your point, it's just objective. It's more of an art than it is science. And yeah, like you just said, I could have 10 writers give me 10 things and they could all be good.
They could all be good.
Flavor. Whereas if I have a list of humans and the AI says this human good, this human bad, but me, Michael, comes to it, looks at the one that it says human good, but that person actually, just doesn't fit the persona. I can binarily say error. And that's what we did recently, actually. And that's, I saw, upwards of 10, 15% error rates, using, Opus 4.8 Max. But yeah, so I think you're in a great spot. You're in an amazing spot.
Yeah. I'm in the business of inaccuracy. I think that's what you're saying. But it is an art, and our art's debatable. And it's relationships. And those are one things that a machine will never replace, is the human relationship that you have with me or I have with you, or the human experience. I think in the future, human experiences are going to be more valued than less. Things like AI4 are going to be looked upon as an opportunity to break out of our silos and our sterile environment of an AI and connect again with people. So I have great hope for the future, and I have great respect for what you've done. I mean, AI4 is amazing in how people share ideas so openly, and who's there in that room to be willing to share. I've never seen that in other technologies. It has always been kind of a trade secret. But you go to AI4, and you can be talking to the CEO, you can be talking to a product manager, you can be talking to a data scientist. I mean, I never thought in my life, Michael, as a PR person, I'd have constant conversations with computational linguists or MIT's data process or machine learning experts. And it seems to me there's this huge nexus that is really reflected in AI, in that we're going to have people who are competent in so many different ranges of things, which is expressed when you go to AI4 and you see it up close. People who never thought they'd be involved with the highly technical side, who are willing to share and give ideas and to advance an entire cause. So I thank you for that.
Because,
and I really, go ahead.
Well said. No, I agree with you. It's a super multidisciplinary field, and that's part of the magic of it.
Absolutely. I often tell people, this is it. This is what I've always looked for in my life, right? First of all, it's an LLM, and I'm a communicator. How glorious is that? I could never talk to a computer. Second of all, I've always been fascinated by neuroscience, and it's neuroscience, right? Third of all, I've always been fascinated by engineers and what they do for a living. And it's brought this cast of characters together, sometimes weird, always wonderful. And then it's expressed as something like AI4. So I really appreciate what you're doing to advance the cause. I urge anybody with any interest in this to attend the North America's largest AI show. I thank you for being with us, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. It was good to be on. Thanks for having me. And yeah, good to see you.
This podcast is a production of Gregory. If you enjoyed our discussion today and want to continue exploring the transformative power of AI, please check out more episodes and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.